does the military do a better job of using an historical perspective in developing their policies and practices?
Well, I think I just thought of another example that relates to this, and this is the Johnson administration's response to China's nuclearization, which actually I think will tie back nicely into this Iran example. We don't typically think of the Johnson administration as being particularly wise when it comes to foreign policy. There was a recent poll that, and I sort of work at the LBJ school, and so there's lots of people who care about Johnson's reputation in the presidential polls that come out every 5 years.
Who was his Secretary of State?
Dean Rusk.
Dean Rusk.
Okay. Said Johnson was the worst foreign policy president of any, which strikes me as a little over the top. But the reaction to the China situation is interesting. So here you have this state that has been extraordinarily threatening, irresponsible, threatens your interests, you fought against them, they have nuclear weapons. You have a lot of people in the administration. In fact, President Kennedy wanted to preemptively attack China's nuclear facilities in 1963 and actually approached the Soviets and said, would you be okay if we did this? He sent Averell Harriman over on a secret mission in the summer of 1963, and the Soviets said no.
This is news to me. Is it news to you guys? Yeah.
Well, it's very well documented. Kennedy thought that once China had nuclear weapons, they'd be intolerable. And it's ironic because the Soviets came to the Americans in 1969 and said, do you mind if we bomb China? And Nixon and Kissinger said, don't do it, and actually used that as a way to go and talk to the Chinese and say, look, we should start talking. You've got problems here. Again, two examples of doing nothing that really worked out nicely. And in '64, Johnson put together this blue ribbon commission led by Roswell Kilpatrick, who had been McNamara's deputy and was now in the private sector. And they looked at what should the response be? And they looked at a range of scenarios. On the one hand, they called it option one, which was don't let anyone have nuclear weapons, prevent anyone from having it, use military force if necessary, even against the French. There was talking about let's sabotage the French nuclear force on the one hand, all the way on the other hand to say let anyone have them. We can't do anything about it. And they came down in the middle.
Let God sort them out. Yeah, I hear that one.
But the one thing they did decide that was very smart was, let's not make a big deal about it. If we're on the front page in the newspaper every day saying, China can't have a bomb, China can't have a bomb, China's going to start saying, man, we got to think about getting a bomb, right? They're paying attention to this, right? I mean, you see this actually in the documents on some of the captured al-Qaeda documents where they say, everyone in the West is talking about these chemical weapons. We ought to look into that, right? And that's an example of, with China, the decision was made not to overreact. In fact, it was downplayed. It was ignored. It was, there were people saying, let's deploy a missile defense system. Let's attack it. Let's sort of create a sort of a kind of some sort of new deterrent posture that's threatening China. They did none of that. And it turned out to be wise. And that's an example of, you know, if with Iran, if we said, you know, if you want to build these things, you know, good luck with that. It'd be interesting to see how that would change the political calculus in Tehran.